So after making another move today to shore up what was arguably the weakest position group along the entire roster, this almost guarantees the Chiefs can go best player available in the draft. Well, that's not only a perfect situation for KC, but sets them up to get several more difference makers on their roster here soon, and that's not so great news for the rest of the NFL. So I've got to talk about that, Trey Smith wanting to stay in KC for years to come, an update to the Xavier Worthy situation, and more. But first, how about those? Alright, first up, the Chiefs brought back another solid piece of their defensive line today when they announced from their own X account that they signed defensive tackle Mike Pennel presumably to another one-year deal. Well, this is a fantastic move in my opinion, as the soon-to-be 34-year-old had a pretty solid 2024 season. He was part of the Chiefs Super Bowl run back in 2019 and returned for the 2020 season before playing for the Falcons and Bears. From there, KC signed him to their practice squad in 2023, and he went from playing in just 3 games that year, being out there for only 45 snaps, to all 17 games and 320 snaps in 2024. He's one of the key run stuffers along the line, starting 7 of those 17 games that he played last year. The only D linemen along the interior to play more snaps than Pennel were, of course, Chris Jones and then Tershawn Wharton, who just signed a massive 3-year, $54 million deal with the Panthers. Speaking of former defensive tackles, Derek Nottie also moved on after 7 seasons, signing a 1-year deal with the New York Jets. And that's why I feel like Pennel's return is such a great thing, because he low-key had a better year than Derek Nottie in 2024, especially as a run stuffer. Pennel's run defense grade was nearly as solid as Chris Jones and by far better than anyone else along the interior of that line. Matt McMullen, the Chiefs senior reporter, even said that Pennel was ranked 13th in the NFL among all defensive tackles that played 150 or more snaps against the run in 2024. So again, this is a great signing, especially for what is probably pretty close to a vet min deal. He's an addition I thought may happen after the draft, but they did sign him near the start of free agency last year and found it important enough to bring him back yet again here sooner rather than later. The team has made several additions to the defensive line here recently, which was definitely the weakest position group on the roster, so I'm glad they've been doing this. It's in a much better place now than roughly even just a week ago after adding the former first-round pick of the Chargers in Jerry Tillery. He might see an uptick in snaps from his 482 last season, considering Turk Wharton is now gone and played almost 800 himself during his career year last year, which sadly was also his last year in KC. However, the Chiefs also added back Marlon Tuipulotu. He was around last year mainly for depth purposes, being signed to the practice squad shortly after cutdown day. From there, they quickly signed him to the active roster and had him around in case of emergency as a depth piece pretty much from there. He played 13 snaps week 17 against the Steelers. Chris Jones, I believe, didn't play in that game, so he was worked a little bit into the rotation. And then he played 48 snaps week 18 against the Denver Broncos when the Chiefs rested most of their starters. Well, shortly after that, he was actually placed on injured reserve. So whatever that injury was, it looks like the former 6th-round pick of the Eagles in the 2021 NFL Draft is good to go and ready to compete for a spot on the 53-man roster this year. But then, late last Thursday, they still weren't done adding to the line when they re-signed defensive end Charles Omenihu, and that was one of the best moves for the defense so far for the team in free agency. He can kick inside as needed and had a fantastic 2023 season that was unfortunately sandwiched between a 6-game suspension that happened at the start of the season and a torn ACL sustained in the AFC Championship game against the Ravens. He returned late in the 2024 season this past year and was around for the playoff run as well, but didn't look quite back to his 2023 form. This year, though, I think this is the best Omenihu we will see yet, and now the weakest position group on the roster a week or so later is actually in pretty decent shape. This allows the Chiefs to head into this year's draft in a pretty solid place. The roster is decent. You don't necessarily need to make any crazy, wild moves out of desperation in the draft, and that's why many around Chiefs Kingdom are saying they would not complain if KC just took the best player available in most of these rounds. Let's talk round 1, though. That could be a running back like Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, a safety such as Malachi Starks out of Georgia, a tight end like Colston Loveland out of Michigan, Mizzou's wideout in Luther Burden III, a defensive tackle like Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, or even a left tackle like Joshua Simmons out of Ohio State. And from here, I want to talk about each one of these guys pretty quickly, a Trey Smith update, sorta kinda, as well as an update to the Xavier Worthy situation in regards to him getting arrested earlier this month. But first, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's video, Underdog. Underdog's not only the best and easiest place to play fantasy sports, but they are also season-long partners of the channel. And yeah, football season might be over, but they've got pick'ems going for NBA, MLB, UFC, and much more. Plus, they have several pre-draft best ball tournaments you can enter for the 2025 NFL season with a chance to win up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in prizes. What's fun about these is you can draft players that are actually in this year's draft. For example, I saw somebody take Ashton Jeanty in the first round, which is pretty bold if you ask me, but it's a fun way to go about building teams and throwing in some of your 2025 draft assumptions or draft crushes. And once the rosters are set, Underdog makes this very easy for you. There's no waivers, substitutions, or trades, with Underdog automatically selecting the high-scoring players at the designated positions to be starters, and only those players' stats over the week are counted towards the accumulated score. These drafts, by the way, can be done in 30-second rounds, or you can take your time with an 8-hour per pick option to make sure you have the capacity to think over your selections. So make sure to join in on the pre-draft fun ASAP, and don't forget to use code HBTC to claim your special pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus credits. Alright, so the Chiefs are in a pretty great spot here heading into the 2025 NFL Draft, and regarding the players I mentioned just prior to the Underdog ad, you can see all of them up here on screen here as a friendly reminder, but you could probably make a case for any one of these guys being taken at pick 31 pretty easily if they somehow manage to fall. Omarion Hampton, of course, would add a dynamic playmaker into a backfield that lacked explosiveness all of last year, but also lacks longevity heading into the future, with both Kareem Hunt and Elijah Mitchell on one-year deals, and Isaiah Pacheco being on the last year of his rookie deal. Hampton averaged over 130 rushing yards per game, had over 1,200 yards after contact last year, which was second only to Ashton Jeanty, and also fumbled only one time on 281 attempts. The guy can play all three downs if needed and is a true dual threat back in the pass game as well. For Malachi Starks, he was a 3-year starter for the Bulldogs, playing at all three levels of the secondary, and is also an explosive blitzer. Hello, Steve Spagnuolo, and KC would love a guy with that kind of versatility to add into a room that just lost Justin Reed to free agency. Of course, we are also assuming that Jaden Hicks takes a big step up in his second year in the NFL, but still, adding a playmaker like Starks would be a no-brainer if he happened to fall. Another guy you could take a swing on is Colston Loveland. He's a potential life after Travis Kelce tight end. He's most people's tight end 2 of this draft class after Tyler Warren, and is seen as a smooth pass catcher that can create separation. His basketball background helps him go up and attack the ball at the catch point, and he's shown a good feel for space and zone coverage. He also led the Wolverines in catches, yards, and touchdowns last season, for what that's worth, considering they are a run-heavy offense, and I can only imagine him in an offense like KC at the disposal of Andy Reid, drawing up plays, learning from Travis Kelce as well for a year before helping that room potentially absorb the potential loss of Kelce after the season. I also know they drafted Jared Wiley last year in the 4th round. He could also take a step up, as could Noah Gray, but you could never add too many playmakers into the tight end room if Travis Kelce moves on. I've also shared quite a bit about Luther Burden III and Walter Nolan, but a trio of Burden, Worthy, and Rice for years to come would be very solid. Burden can track the ball downfield. He forced 30 missed tackles last year and is pretty tough to catch in open space. You could kind of use him in a bunch of different ways in the offense, and Andy Reid would probably have a lot of fun, especially when opposing defenses are worried, especially for 2025, about dealing with Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown. Defensive tackle Walter Nolan is a guy you can let glean from Chris Jones and line up next to him on passing downs to rush the passer and take advantage of Chris Jones getting a ton of attention out there. He can stop the run as well, but he racked up 6.5 sacks, 35 pressures, and 14 tackles for loss last year at Ole Miss, playing all across the line, and he might be one of my favorite potential go get that guy in round 1 if he's available. And before I get to another favorite potential pick in this draft, I'll mention the obvious here about all of these guys I just mentioned. They all could very well be gone by pick 31. This is just a, hey, if any of these guys are available at the end of round 1, it's pretty easy to justify why the Chiefs could take one of them considering how the roster looks heading into the draft. If they really wanted one of these guys, it's probably safest to go up and get one of them like they have in previous years with players like wide receiver Xavier Worthy last year and cornerback Trent McDuffie a few years ago. Sometimes you have to be a little aggressive to go and get the player that you want, and that could be the case with offensive tackle Joshua Simmons out of Ohio State. If he falls to 31, that's probably a no-brainer move, but honestly, I could very well see KC trading up to go and get him. If you did, you'd probably need to get ahead of the Houston Texans, who need long-term tackle help pretty badly after trading away Laramie Tunzel and signing Cam Robinson to a one-year Band-Aid deal. Well, a friend of mine in the YouTube space, Marcus Whitman, who runs the channel That Franchise Guy, recently did a 2-round mock draft in which he had the Chiefs trading up to pick 23, so 2 spots ahead of the Texans with the Green Bay Packers to go up and get Joshua Simmons. They did have to sacrifice pick 31 and 63 to do so, but they got pick 87 and 159 back in return. And considering they still have pick 66 and 95 for top 100 picks, this could potentially be worth doing to shore up their left tackle of the future. He's a bit undersized with sub 34-inch arms and is 6'5", but that's pretty similar to Jalen Moore, who KC just signed to a 2-year deal as they're perceived to be left tackle along the line for the next couple of years. Anyway, the biggest thing with Simmons is the season-ending patella tendon knee injury he had and suffered, had surgically repaired, all of that. But that's why he could potentially fall into KC's lap, even via a small trade-up. Simmons allowed just 1 sack in 13 games for the Buckeyes in 2023 as their blindside protector, and allowed just 1 pressure and 0 sacks in 2024 through 6 games before his knee injury. So if he's the guy for the Chiefs this year, I absolutely could see a move up to get him if they aren't scared by his medicals. Speaking of guys who had potentially scary medicals in college, offensive lineman Trey Smith proved to be one of the best picks for his value in the 2021 NFL Draft and is now currently the highest paid guard in football with that $23.4 million guaranteed on the franchise tag. He's one of just 2 players that got tagged this year, and the other, wide receiver T. Higgins of the Bengals, recently got his long-term deal done. Well, Trey Smith was on the Kay Adams show recently, I think this morning, and was asked for some kind of an update regarding his long-term deal, and he replied that all he can really do is focus on training, working out, and getting ready for the season, but he loves KC, it's home to him, Chiefs Kingdom are some of the best people he's ever been around, and ultimately, he would love to stay in KC long term. That's his plan. Well, I sure do hope he gets something done long term because it makes sense. The guy is only 25 years old, is clearly a top guard in the NFL, has been very healthy his entire NFL career so far, and then from a practical standpoint, it would be pretty insane to trade Joe Thuney away to the Bears and not lock up Trey Smith for the next 3 to 4 years. Losing 2 top guards in the span of 2 off seasons, if a long-term deal didn't get done, would be a pretty surprising move by Brett Veach and his team. All right, next up, we have a bit of an update to the Xavier Worthy situation that happened earlier on in March. He was initially arrested and was facing felony assault charges, but within 24 hours of being arrested, he actually got released, and his lawyers put out a statement during that time pushing back against the alleged assault, saying that Worthy's ex-fiancé Tia Jones was recently asked to vacate Mr. Worthy's residence upon discovery of her infidelity, and he actually asked her to leave the house multiple times over the last couple of weeks leading up to the arrest. They then continued in this statement that she got violent with photographic evidence to prove it, and from there, the district attorney Sean Dick said his office will not proceed with the charge against Worthy, quote, after interviewing multiple witnesses. They said the case is being declined at this time pending completion of the investigation by the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. So charges being dropped or declined that quickly doesn't happen very often, so this obviously had things leaning in a positive direction, or at least the scales were tipping in the favor of Xavier Worthy, because if the district attorney had anything solid to go on, especially considering how serious these DV allegations were. They would not have declined the case so quickly. Well, from there, Worthy's ex-fiancé and her lawyers released a statement roughly a week later. She filed an application for a protective order against Xavier Worthy due to the events that took place back on March 7th, and their side of the statement was basically the polar opposite. They went on to say she is fully cooperating with law enforcement as they continue to actively investigate the violence that occurred that night. And then Miss Jones looks forward to the facts and circumstances of that night coming to light through the formal legal process and getting the justice she deserves. Again, that was in their statement that they released. Well, TMZ was also able to obtain the court filing that featured in detail claims made in her application for that protective order against Worthy. And again, she kind of flipped the script, saying it was actually Worthy that was unfaithful and that he allegedly put his hands on her at least 5 times in the last year in a very violent manner. The 5th time being what allegedly took place on that Friday, March 7th, and ultimately led to the arrest of Worthy. Well, immediately after this, Worthy's lawyers responded to these accusations directly to TMZ, saying that Worthy denies each of the allegations that were made in the filing. Mr. Worthy maintains his innocence, Chip Lewis and Sam Bassett, his lawyers said, and stands by the conclusions of the district attorney after law enforcement's review of Miss Jones' unfounded allegations. They actually then said that Worthy has hired an additional civil attorney to address Tia Jones's defamatory statements. Well, then today it looks like the civil attorney has indeed been hired because it's being reported that Xavier Worthy is suing his ex-fiancé for harm she allegedly did directly to himself, his property, as well as his credibility and reputation, with that last one probably being the biggest thing here. Worthy again pushed back on the accusations that he was the abusive one and said again, it was actually her. He goes on to say that she destroyed his property, pulled out his hair, providing photographic evidence, which is in this article, and she refused to leave his home after asking her repeatedly over the span of a couple of weeks once he found out about her infidelity. Well, that's a stance he's had since the beginning, and in today's update, he took that same stance, saying the story of repeated abuse from him was made up by her to get that protective order, and that she's actually exhibited similar behavior in at least one previous high-profile relationship she was in. I mean, I'm just going to state the obvious here. What a freaking mess. Both sides are obviously taking polar opposite stances, both claiming that the opposite of what's being accused is what actually happened. And it's worth noting that the investigation, from what I understand, is still ongoing by the Williamson County Sheriff's Office, even though the district attorney's office dismissed said charges. As a reminder, after dismissing those charges, the DA's office noted this: as is our practice with all declines, should you develop additional information indicative of probable cause in this case, our office will consider that information and may present the case at the time to a Williamson County grand jury. And that is where the situation remains at this point in time. I don't have many thoughts or opinions to give here because it's such a serious thing that's being accused here on both sides, other than what I've already said. And I think it's important not to feed into the he said, she said game. I would rather just present you with the facts that we know of at hand at this point in time. So let's just let the court of law / ongoing police investigation continue, and we will see what comes from this, if anything at all. Both the NFL and the Chiefs again said they are aware of the situation and are still gathering information themselves. Even with the charges dismissed, though, the NFL will most likely look into this matter and decide if Worthy did anything warranting a suspension based on a violation of the NFL player conduct policy. But that's really all we have at this point in time. I'm not saying a suspension is coming. I'm just saying the NFL could look into this a bit further here down the road. For right now, here's what we do know. This is what we do have at this point in time. The charges of Worthy are dismissed. The police are still investigating in some capacity. She, his ex-fiancé, Tia Jones, released a statement through her lawyers. Worthy's lawyers responded, basically saying the polar opposite, and now Worthy is suing his ex-fiancé. What's next still remains to be seen, but it's important to remember it's innocent until proven guilty, and as of right now, the only case that's ongoing is the civil case of Worthy suing his ex-fiancé. And that's it at this point in time. If anything else major comes from this, I'll definitely include an update. But for now, it's best to just let the situation play out and get ready for what the Chiefs are going to be doing in this draft. That's roughly a month away. And before I get out of here, I do want to mention another roster move that the Chiefs made today. It was a move that they already made, and then that player signed his tender. That was exclusive rights, free agent Mike Caliendo. It was announced today that he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, which you're probably like, well, I thought we already heard about that. Again, he was an exclusive rights free agent, so he was offered a contract at the league minimum for his credited season. They did this with both Matt Araiza. I believe he already signed his tender, and then Caliendo was next, and he's going to get $1.03 million. Caliendo is fine, guys, as a backup guard. Just don't let him go in there being your starting left guard in the back half of the season, the playoffs, and the Super Bowl against a great defensive line. As long as he is there in case of emergency, that is all right to me. But let me know your thoughts on the signing of Caliendo, I guess, but also mainly who you think KC should take in round 1 of the NFL draft. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?